Welcome to my channel, where the scariest stories come to life. Before we dive into today's chilling tale, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss a story. Now, let's get into the horror. Back in 2008, I used to date a girl who lived in Abergavenny, South Wales, UK. This is a very old Welsh market town with various old buildings and vast ancient history. Anyway, my ex, let's call her Cece, used to live in this old toll house with her sister and mother on the corner of what used to be a main road many hundreds of years ago, and has the classic two-door look with exposed black timber beams crisscrossing white painted stone walls. Although the house had extensive renovation in the early 1900s, the site and the layout had remained unchanged for several hundred years. The downstairs lounge room was set quite low into the ground, with the house effectively built on an embankment, meaning the rear wall of the lounge was under the natural ground level. Cece would mention how behind the rear wall and the lounge there used to be an old access tunnel that led to the nearby castle some 500 meters away. The ruins of that castle are still there to this day. The tunnel had collapsed hundreds of years ago, and the entrance was boarded over. This rear wall even had the remains of the tunnel's stone entryway archway as a feature, but was blocked off beyond a single layer of masonry. It was common in medieval times for monks at monasteries and castles to use these access tunnels to travel in and out of the grounds and out of the townships. Anyway, the collapsed tunnel behind the lounge room always used to intrigue me. It had a cold draft no matter what time of day it was, which I never really thought much of until strange things began to happen. The first curious event that occurred was when I wasn't actually there. I was on the phone with Cece one evening, chatting away about our days at school and any other rubbish 15 or 16-year-olds would talk about. Suddenly, mid-sentence, I heard this whooshing sound and an extremely loud bang. Cece let out a tiny yelp. On the other end of the phone, there was silence, and I asked if she was okay. Eventually, after 5 seconds of that deafening silence, she responded shakily, "Yeah, my books just started flying off the shelves from across the room at me." She brushed it off as if it was nothing. "Wait, what?" I asked her. She replied, "Yeah. It happens all the time. My house is very haunted." She was so casual about it, and I found that a bit comforting, honestly, considering I was going to be staying there that coming weekend. It also made me wonder, though, this is normal for her? Nothing happened for some time. One evening, about 2 months later, though, we were sat there watching TV in the lounge downstairs when I heard someone shuffling around upstairs. "How long has your sister been home?" I asked, to which she replied, "Nobody's home." "Nobody is. She just texted me, they're all out." I looked up at the ceiling above as we could clearly hear shuffling footsteps on the upstairs level, creaking the floorboards. The footsteps were muffled and soft, like someone who was creeping around. We were both very creeped out. We snuck upstairs to check and make sure that no one had broken in via the rear window. A burglar had done so quite recently. We found absolutely no one there, and every door and window was properly sealed. We went into Cece's bedroom and closed the door behind us, leaving it only slightly ajar. We sat there in quiet, waiting to see if we would hear those footsteps again. After several minutes of sitting in this eerily quiet and uneasy atmosphere, we decided to head back downstairs. We were hearing nothing, and there didn't seem to be anyone up there. The next thing that happened is something I'll never forget, though. As I approached the bedroom door, I reached out to the handle to gently push it open. The door was only open a sliver, and not on the latch. As my hand was pushing it open, the door suddenly slammed right in my face like someone had shoulder barged it from the opposite side. Instinctively, I tried to turn the door handle to open the door, but I could feel the force of someone turning it against me. The knob turned with some resistance, eventually, as though someone were holding on to the other side. As I pushed it open, it snapped back closed with some force. The only way I can describe it is as though it was actually a person on the other side trying to keep us in that room, holding the doorknob as hard as they could, and leaning all of their body weight into the door itself. I could even hear the old timber door creaking under the pressure of something pushing it from the other side. Suddenly, after a few seconds of this, the resistance disappeared. I turned the doorknob, and the door swung open completely free, absolutely no one on the other side. There was no way a person could have done that and hidden somewhere in the house that quickly. We rushed from room to room, but we couldn't find anyone hiding. All the windows were closed, all the doors were still locked from the inside. It suddenly occurred to me that while I was trying to open the door before it slammed shut, the sliver of light that should have been passing through the ajar door was not there. It was pitch black, as if the dead of night was on the landing, or something very dark and translucent was blocking the light from coming through that gap in the door. And that thought still creeps me out to this day. From then on, things literally started to go bump in the night regularly. I remember one night I was in the guest room and got up for a piss at around 3 a.m. The toilets were downstairs. As I was heading to the base of the stairs, I heard a loud thump from the lounge room. I stared into the pitch black beyond the old crooked doorway leading into the lounge room. I could tell the thump was coming from the rear wall, like someone's fist softly knocking a hollow plasterboard, as if someone or something was behind the hollow wall where the collapsed tunnel's entrance was. I stood there, frozen in shock as the thumps continued over and over. My eyes were watering with fear like I've never experienced before. I bolted upstairs and woke up Cece. We sat on her bedroom floor together, listening to the thumping go on for 30 minutes or so. Gradually, it grew softer and softer until disappearing altogether. I'm sure other events happened that I wasn't there for or that I didn't notice at the time. Her mom used to drink a lot and regale us with vague stories of moaning she heard from behind the lounge room wall most nights. I remember I even saw Cece's bedroom door open on its own on the webcam and her mirror get thrown off her wall and smashed to the ground. Whatever was in that house, it had a sad but sinister feeling to it. We broke up not long afterwards, and I never went back there, but I did drive past that house recently, some 16 years later. It gave me chills like nothing else in a long time. So I really had zero intention of sleeping in my car that night. I was out with some friends in downtown St. Louis, bar hopping and just enjoying the night, but then I lost track of how much I had been drinking by the time it really hit me. I was way too hammered to drive home. I also didn't want to blow money on a hotel, though, or figure out an Uber back to the suburbs. At that point, I made the dumb decision to just sleep it off in my car. I ended up parking in this small, mostly empty lot near the riverfront. It seemed quiet enough, and there were no sketchy vibes about it, at least at first. My car is an old sedan, not exactly built for comfort, but I tried to make the back seat work. I grabbed a ratty sweatshirt from the trunk to use as a pillow, and cracked the windows just enough for some air. The streetlights above were flickering, giving off this weird, eerie glow. I was way too tired and too buzzed to care, though. Eventually, I drifted off at around 2 a.m. Though I was woken up by a tapping on my window. My first thought, great, a cop's gonna bust me for sleeping here. But no, it was not a cop at all. I squinted out the window, and there was this figure just standing there, right up against the glass. The light from the street was barely illuminating them, just enough to make out the shape of someone in a hoodie, standing way too close to my car for comfort. I tried to play it cool, thinking maybe they'd just go away if I didn't react. Instead, they started circling my vehicle, slowly dragging their fingers along the glass. My heart was pounding. They stopped at the driver's side door, and I heard them try the handle. Thank God I'd locked it. They then moved to the back window where I was lying down, and pressed their face right into the glass. I couldn't see their face clearly, just a shadowy outline of eyes staring right at me. I didn't move. I barely breathed. I was hoping they'd get bored and just leave. After what felt like forever, they stepped back a bit, but they did not walk away. I stayed there frozen, trying to figure out if they were still there without getting up. Finally, I worked up the nerve to sit up and peek out the windshield. There they were, just standing 10 feet in front of my car, staring at my vehicle and not moving. I don't even remember grabbing my keys, but all of a sudden, I had them and, shaking, started the car. The second the headlights flicked on, the person bolted, running off into the darkness. I didn't stick around to see where they had gone. I just floored it out of there, driving until I found a busy, well-lit gas station where I stayed for the rest of the night. My doors were locked, my headlights were on, and I was wide awake. The next day, I still couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Even now, whenever I drive past that part of town, I catch myself glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that figure again, lurking in the shadows. When I was in high school, I moved to a major city suburb. While the majority of this area was suburban in appearance, there were still some rural features as well. One thing I hated about this area was that it did not have the best lighting. Streetlights in my area were very scarce, so it was always extremely dark at night. My house was situated at the corner of a street and avenue. My house faced the main street, which was a few miles long and led to many neighborhoods in the area. The avenue that my house was on ran perpendicular to the main street and was about a quarter of a mile long. It was made of about 6 houses or so. The avenue was almost entirely gravel. At the end of the avenue, the gravel ended and dense vegetation began. The dense vegetation eventually led to a state forest. At the time, I had been dating a girl that lived in the area. In order to walk to and from her house, I traveled the main street previously mentioned, and walked all the way to the end of that street. At the end of that street was a small field. Walking through the field led to a wooden fence. The wooden fence separated the backyards of multiple houses, including hers, from the field. After leaving her home one night, I realized it was a lot later than I thought it was. It was after midnight, and we had school the next day. I wanted to get home and get some sleep. After she locked her fence door and went inside her house, I turned around and started making my way through the field. As mentioned previously, this area had virtually no lighting at night. For this reason, I opted not to use the sidewalk and instead walked in the middle of the main street. I did this mainly to get a better monitor of my surroundings. Walking in the middle of the street meant I could use the moonlight and avoid walking extremely close to trees. At this point, I was nearing my home and approaching the area we called the Black Hole. We called this area the remaining half a mile to my house the Black Hole because it was the darkest stretch of the journey home. There were no streetlights at all, and it was completely surrounded by trees on all sides, pitch black. After entering the Black Hole, I began to hear this strange sound. It was too far to make out clearly, and I thought it might just be an animal. I didn't think too much of it, and continued walking. I could see a car approaching in the distance, so I momentarily made my way to the sidewalk and waited for the car to pass by. After I made my way back into the middle of the street, I began to hear the sound again. I realized the sound was getting louder, so I decided to increase my pace. As I was nearing my home, I continued listening in the hopes of determining the origin of this sound. The longer I listened, though, the louder it seemed to get. Eventually, the sound was so loud that I could clearly make out that it was a forceful inhaling and exhaling of air. I was terrified. I knew whatever was making that sound was now extremely close to me, but I decided I would not look back until I got near my house. That way I could utilize the light from the only streetlight in this area. I could hear the inhales and exhales getting louder and louder and louder until I finally neared the streetlight. I worked up the courage to turn around, and was shocked by the sight that greeted me when I turned around. There was a man right behind me, not on the sidewalk or on the side of the road. He was so close to my back that if he tripped, he would knock me over. I looked into the man's eyes, and he looked into mine. He then abruptly slipped around me and ran down the avenue that I lived on, out into the darkness. If you made it this far, thanks for reading. I have a few more creepy stories that I don't mind writing about if anyone is interested in reading them. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to give the video a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a terrifying tale. See you in the next one.